Okay, so hi, and welcome back to Map the Maze. As you can see, today I'm being joined by Monica, who has been on the podcast before. So welcome, Dr. Monica Borschel, live from California.
Nice to see you, Sala.
It's
Thanks
good
for
to see
inviting
you too. And so today, Monica's talked to us about lots of different things that are relevant to people who are separating and divorcing. But today we're going to talk about something that's relevant, I guess, to parents in general, which is parental anxiety. So,
me.
can I ask you, Monica, just to tell us a little bit about what is parental anxiety?
Sure. And I think a lot of times when people are divorcing or separating, it gets heightened, right? So parents obviously have anxiety for multiple reasons. Are my kids okay? Do they have friends? How are they doing in school? Do they have everything they need? But when sometimes, okay, this is research based. So sometimes they say that women have it a little bit more
Hmm.
because obviously the child was biologically a part of the woman. And then after a woman has a baby, her brain changes. So she can hear the cries,
Mm,
she's more alert to things, smells, all of that. And so there can be this hypervigilance.
mm,
Interesting enough, men's brain change too after they have children, where it's more oxytocin gets released in different situations, so they're more likely to connect.
hmm.
And sometimes that men don't like hearing this, but their testosterone can drop.
Okay, good to know.
Yes. So biologically, parents are wired for this caregiving,
Mm,
right? But when it turns into a hypervigilance, then it can be overprotectiveness, enmeshment,
mm.
which is can cause a lot of damage.
Can I just ask you what, um, maybe just to explain what enmeshment means?
Sure. So enmeshment is where it could be either parent. It's like you are an extension of me. You are a
Mm,
mini me. So what I'm feeling, you feel.
right.
What I want you to be, you're gonna be. So what I say you can and can't feel, what I say you can and can't be. So the child doesn't really form their own identity and
Hmm.
they might not develop emotionally
Yeah.
at the right appropriate pace.
Okay. I mean, it kind of reminds me of a colleague I had who was a real rugby dad, loved rugby himself, played his whole life. That was, his thing. And when his son was 11, the son actually said to him, I want to do ballet because
Yeah.
rugby is your dream, not my dream.
And so
But
how does the father respond?
didn't go well. Um, I think luckily, um, it seems like his son was pretty mature for his age and was pretty clear about what he wanted. So he was able to convince him to do both, and then eventually he dropped the rugby. But it was hard because I think there's this sense of that mini me, that identity, and also this has been beneficial for me. I want you to have it, or I didn't get to do it. I want you to do it. It's
Yeah, for sure. And you bring up a very valid point where some people they take it their anxiety is so big
mm,
that it's OCD, turns into OCD, and then it's like the kid has to be clean at all times, can't eat anything with preservatives. These are just
oh
examples,
yeah,
right? Can only go here, can only do that at this time, and it's very rigid. And
yeah.
so that rigidity doesn't leave room for the child to develop a personality, identity, and then they become anxious.
Yeah. So maybe talk to us a little bit about what is the impact of hypervigilance on children? So one thing you're talking about is it impedes their own development of their own personality and identity. And what are some of the other things that can happen to children if their parents are hypervigilant?
If you think about little kids, let's just go with toddlers.
Yeah.
They are crawling, bumping into things, falling down, climbing trees. But if someone's really hyper vigilant, it's like, okay, I don't want you to go swimming.
Mm,
Of course, when kids get older, I don't want you to go swimming. I don't want you to ride your bike. Maybe the kid has to have elbow pads, knee
yeah.
pads, helmet. Which I'm not saying that's bad, but then the kid thinks, oh, the world's a scary place.
Yeah.
And if someone thinks the world's a scary place, then they restrict their behavior. They don't try things. they might be afraid of their parents.
Yeah.
Sometimes anxiety turns into aggression or
Mm.
frustration. So it could be a walking on eggshells potentially.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of think about times, because we both have dogs, where you've probably seen
Like,
this as well, where you see people with children, and obviously the parent is apparently scared of dogs. And so they
mm,
pull the child is kind of interested in the dog, but they pull the child in and they're like, it's almost like they're transferring that fear.
yeah,
They're teaching that fear to their child, even if,
absolutely.
the dog's maybe not even interested in them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Transference of fear. So now that kid doesn't have that experience with the dog,
Yeah.
or they don't have the experience in the swimming pool.
Yeah, or even just the neutral experience of not fear. Like, maybe
Yeah,
it's,
that's true too.
like, not engagement, but actually I don't have to be scared, I can just walk past. It's not a big deal. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned when we talked about this before was emotional contagion. Could you talk a little bit about what that is?
So when you smile at me, I want to smile back, right? So you're smiling right now. I'm like, oh my God. So if someone enters the room and they're just like tense and tight, you're like, ugh, right? You feel your own body move away. So
Yeah,
they did a study where I'm probably gonna mess up what they did, but they put adrenaline in people, and then someone would come in either happy or not happy, and
yeah,
then the adrenaline would kind of escalate whatever emotion that was.
right,
And so people with PTSD, if they see faces that are even neutral, then they automatically assume like, ooh, this is someone unhappy and there's the threats, right? So
right.
PTSD is high anxiety too. So think of going to a restaurant and a waitress comes in and she comes to your table and she's had a bad day and she's grumpy and you're like, ugh, right?
Yeah.
Or she smiles and you're like, hi.
Yeah,
We're just it's our mirror neurons
yeah.
kind of pick up on what people are feeling and we react to it.
Oh, Robert Sapolsky talks
Mhm.
about how, from an evolutionary perspective, this has been a good trade-off for us to have this ability because then we can empathize, we can um, connect with other people, which means that we can then hopefully work cooperatively together or
Yeah,
no, actually, I'm not safe. That
yeah,
sort of
exactly.
echoing can be really helpful for that group dynamic. But I guess one thing it's also really I'm thinking about in the mediation session when people come in as mediators, we kind of try and do the opposite, which
Okay.
is so we're trying to be the smiley waitress.
Yeah.
So people typically come in and they are in a state of anxiety. They are often angry or sad or just
Right.
overwhelmed. And we try and model calm, focus, emotionally regulated behavior to try and, I guess, emotionally contage them the other way.
Totally. Yeah, it
Yeah.
works too, right? I mean, some people are just like not having it because they're so anxious,
Yeah,
but
but I guess it's interesting to think about these things have a positive and a negative side to them. That I guess because of the way we're wired, we often focus on the negative, but we can also positively influence other people,
yeah, for
kind of
sure.
reset. Yeah. I mean, you were talking about parental anxiety. So does that also impact children? So the way parents feel can be is picked up and then responded to by children?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And I think kids, especially the really little kids,
Yeah.
baby, toddlers, the ones who haven't really formed words yet,
Hmm.
they're very kinesthetic, right? Because they can't express. They're
Yeah.
picking up on more cues, body, facial expression. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like they're hypersensitive
They're hypersensitive. Yeah.
to the emotions. I mean, I do remember reading, because obviously we often talk about the impact of conflict on children. And I do remember reading a study about babies who were asleep, but their brain waves were monitored and their parents argued and they were disturbed, even though
Interesting.
they were asleep. Were still, they're I guess your environment is going to determine if you survive. So you've got to be really alert to it. But it's kind of sad to think that they're so alert that even while they're asleep, they're still kind of monitoring, am I safe? Am I not safe?
Yeah, and that goes all in. Now we're going into attachment as well,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, does parental anxiety have an impact on attachment, or are they kind of really two separate things?
I think that it can. So if you're parent is always anxious, you're
Mm,
anxious, you might not want to be around that parent. So maybe you're avoidant,
right.
maybe you're fearful, the push pull, or
Yeah,
maybe you're anxious. Like, does mommy love me? Does daddy love me? They're always anxious. I mean, think about if people are too high anxiety, they might get agitated, they might get frustrated, they might say things they don't mean. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I guess that's the thing. How do you determine if someone has parental anxiety? What are some of the signs that you would look for?
So I'm gonna just take it to the extreme case of
Okay.
um someone, I won't say gender, someone, anyone taking their kid to the doctor for every little thing. And so
Right,
maybe the kid has been to the doctor 12 times in 10 months.
right.
Right. So, oh, they're scratching, there's some mosquito bites, or
Mhm.
you can hear it in the overprotectiveness,
Right.
or I don't, and especially in divorce.
Mm,
I don't trust this person with my
yeah,
kid, even though they're married and they leave their kid with their husband or wife. Now they're divorced. They don't trust them anymore.
yep,
They don't know who that partner
yeah.
has at the house.
I'm just wondering if this is something that also plays into it, which is I've definitely sat in mediation rooms where the case I'm particularly thinking of, this little girl was 6. She would go from one parent back to the other parent. As soon as she got in the door at the returning parent's home, she was stripped down, put in a shower, told that she had to become clean, and then that parent came to the mediation and said, "And every time she comes home, she cries, so something bad must be happening at the other parent's home." It's like, but let's just think for a moment what it might be like to be that little girl coming home to you, and the first thing that happens is she is stripped down in the corridor and shoved in a shower because she's gotta be what might that be like for a 6-year-old? But I'm
Yeah,
just wondering if is that the kind of thing that somebody that it might show as, that parental
that
anxiety?
might potentially,
Yeah,
right?
n I
Like
mean, yeah,
some people feel like outdoor clothes cannot be indoors.
yeah,
If I go to the grocery store, I need to come home and shower, wash all my clothes, wash my hair. So people don't want to leave the house because it's a hassle because you have to
yeah,
clean everything when you get back.
yeah. I mean, I guess the other challenge is because I mean, I'm just thinking particularly of that parent because then it meant that the child's upset, which I think was pretty because if that happened to me every time I got home,
Sure,
I'd be
I
pretty
would be
upset.
upset too. I'd be like, "Oh,
So,
you're dirty."
yeah, but I guess the challenge is that it then sets up a conflict between the parents because now the only reason the child can be upset must be because you did something. At the other home, they're not happy. Therefore, when she comes home, she is releasing the negative emotions that she's encountered from being with I mean, you can see how, it could really set people up to have a very conflictual discussion around children's arrangements.
Yeah, and it's very common for kids to be upset when they have to go from parent to parent. Most kids
Yeah,
cry. They don't
yeah,
like it. They want their parents to be together. They miss their dad when they're at their mom's. They miss their mom when they're at their dad's. It's that's a
yeah,
transition all the time. So
yeah.
yeah, it's upsetting.
I mean, I guess and also the other thing that I guess we know is particularly for younger children, it
Mm.
kind of reminds them that mum and dad aren't together. So every time is just like, "Oh, I was really happy when I was with parent A, but now I'm moving." It's not that I don't wanna see parent B or that I didn't have a good time with parent A, it's just now I'm just gonna be with parent B. I've just remembered because
Yeah.
I was busy or engaged or it's really difficult. I mean, this is kind of one of the things that I think is interesting is also that transmission of emotion between parents and children, that there's a lot of messaging that's going on when people talk to their children, that some of it is deliberate, like, "Don't do this or do this." But I guess what you're also saying is that there are lots of messages that are transmitted to children that people may not even realize they're
Yes.
sending.
It could
Yeah.
be body language, facial expressions, just how you feel, and kids are picking up on that
Mm.
vibe, right? So imagine that woman you were talking about
Yeah.
beside the shower
Yeah.
comes home and she feels guilty. Like, oh, I blame myself. I got in a divorce. I blame myself. I split up the family. And then that makes her anxious. And then the kid picks up on it and starts to cry. Like,
Yeah.
mommy's not happy. And I just came home. It could be so many things,
Yeah.
right?
I guess the other challenge is that particularly for children, because cognitively they're not developed, but also their worldview is I am the center, I mean, naturally, but that they have this outsized impact on how adults feel. So if somebody's upset, if someone's angry, if someone's anxious, it's probably me. Like, it's my
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah. Because one of the things I guess is also interesting, so there's the sort of the unconscious transmission of thoughts and feelings to children. But then often I kind of encounter people who say, "I have to tell the small child or the child or any of children, frankly, what a terrible parent the other person is because it's the truth." Can I ask you just to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So that is going into parental alienation, right? The naughty
Well,
word.
but I think it's also, I mean, I guess I'm wondering whether there's also an element of there might be parental anxiety. It's then
Sure.
kind of projected onto the other parent. And now it's this whole I have to tell the child my
Yes.
perceptions about what's happened. The other parents left you, the other parents abandoned you. I'm
Yes.
still here.
I
Um,
still think, yeah.
because it's the truth. I've heard so many parents say,
And I still think that's
yeah,
parental alienation. And it's probably not on
yeah.
purpose. It's not on purpose, but sometimes it is.
Yes.
So,
Well, I've had people say,
yeah,
"Oh, but I can't lie to my children." And I'm just like, people lie to children all the time.
absolutely.
Like, eat your broccoli and you'll be
But
fine.
yeah, I mean, let's say hypothetically your ex is not a good person. They
Yeah.
lie, they cheat, they steal, and you want to
Yeah.
protect children.
Yeah.
Let's say they're emotionally abusive and the court system, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Doesn't always do anything. Doesn't mean you have to say their parent. One thing you should always avoid is abandonment.
Yeah.
Even if they have a new family, it doesn't mean they abandon you, they don't love you, they don't care about
Yeah.
you. You can omit certain things, but do your best to keep them safe, right? So they
Yeah.
don't need to know about affairs. You're not lying, you're omitting. They're not abandoning. That's the worst thing you can tell a child.
Yes.
But it
Yeah.
might just be like, kids tell the other parent, oh, dad yelled at me or said
Yeah.
something that hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and empathize, validate those feelings, right? Teach
I
them
mean,
how to cope with that if you know how.
yeah. Can I ask you though, just to go back a step to, abandonments, why is saying to a child, the other parents abandoned you is so destructive to children?
Because, like you said, the worldview is yes, I'm the center of the world, but
Yeah.
also mom and dad are these two wonderful people. They're like godlike figures.
Yeah.
If my dad or my mom abandoned me, then I must not be worth much.
Mm.
So now maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I'm worthless. Maybe I'm going to start teenagers or
Yeah.
older kids. Maybe I'm going to start doing drugs or hanging out with the wrong crowd because they accept me. They like me for who I am.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's really interesting because I feel like that message, which I think sometimes parents, as you say, they want to try and protect the child
Yeah,
from the bad parent,
yeah,
um, but it really backfires
it
because
does.
actually what they're doing is so destructive to that child's sense of worth and the idea that I have a mum and a dad and they love me and maybe they've made bad decisions, whatever, but they still love me. But to
Yes.
say that
Mhm.
because maybe that's how you feel as an adult, but to say that to a child is so overwhelming to their sense of self.
Devastating. It's devastating. I mean, when you start talking about self harm, a lot of that's abandonment
Mm,
issues. Not all of it, but a lot of it's abandonment
yeah,
issues, you know, getting in with
yeah,
the wrong crowd.
yeah. I mean, I think I mean, and that's also kind of interesting to think about is the different ages because I've had parents say to children under 10, "Oh yes, the other parents abandoned you, abandoned us and gone off with a new partner." But I've also had them say it to teenagers because the thinking is, well, teenagers know what a relationship is. So they're old enough to understand, which I still don't accept. But the way that it manifests in the children can be really different based on their developmental stage. So what you're talking about is a teenager might act out, might kind of truant or hang out late or start drinking or, get into trouble, whereas a younger child it might manifest in a different way.
The kids are trying, okay, I'm in California, right? Not in
Yeah.
Hong Kong. Hong Kong's a little different. Kids are trying drugs a lot earlier, for
Mm,
sure. I mean, getting in little kids in elementary school in Hong Kong are doing things they shouldn't be doing.
yeah.
because they don't feel loved, they don't feel worthwhile, they feel abandoned, and then take it to the very extreme and you start talking about suicide. It's awful.
Mm.
I mean, not to like use scare tactics, but be careful what you say.
Yeah.
Never say that they've been abandoned, right? I
Yeah.
mean, maybe your ex-partner did leave and you have no clue where they are. Well, we got to work with that. We got to figure
Yeah.
out how
So
we're going
what's
to
a
keep that
so
child
I mean, if
safe.
you really feel like the other person is the worst and
Yeah.
has maybe abandoned the family, what is a phrasing, what is a suitable message that a parent could use in that situation?
And so there's all different cases, right? So let's
Yeah.
say the parent is starting a new family, but they very much want to keep in contact with their
Yeah.
kids. But the other parent's upset. Don't ever say anything. Like they still love you. You're gonna have
Yeah.
new half brother, sister. You're gonna have new
Yeah.
siblings. Don't turn them against the new partner. Don't turn them against your
Yeah.
ex. But if your ex literally skipped
Yeah.
town, I would say maybe remind the child how loved they are, not that
Yeah.
the dad abandoned or the mom abandoned them.
Yeah.
Come up with a child friendly something, depending on the
Yeah.
age, right? Like
Yeah.
mom and dad was overwhelmed. I don't know where they are.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're safe. They still love you. We'll try and find them. We'll figure this out together. None
Yeah.
of this is your fault, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of that reassurance is even
Yeah,
more important.
I think
So
so.
whether it's that just that they maybe have separated from the adult relationship or they've actually totally disappeared,
Yeah,
it's
I think it's rare.
making sure that the messages to the child are about you are loved. None of
Yes.
this is you.
Yes.
This is an adult thing. You know, adults do stuff, but
Absolutely.
I am here and and they still love you, I guess, is also a positive message for children. You know, maybe things are difficult for them.
Maybe things are different. And then you get
Yeah.
into substance abuse or
Yeah.
severe mental illness, and it's literally that parent is
Yeah.
hanging on to dear life and it has nothing
Yeah.
to do with the child. I mean, these are extreme cases.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I sort of think about it, it's it's really not only is it counterproductive, make these sort of statements or talk about the judgments that you have of the other parent when they're negative to the child, but it's also you're hurting the wrong person. The
You're hurting the
person you
wrong
really
person.
want to hurt is your former partner, but actually the person you're hurting is your child who,
Yeah.
you love. So
Yes.
it's kind of like the weapons directed at the wrong
Yeah.
person.
And going out for
Yeah.
revenge against your ex is gonna hurt your child too.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've heard kids say, I don't care. I just want my parents to stay out of court.
Yeah.
I don't care if they like each other or not. I just want them to get along enough so we know who we're spending time with.
Yeah.
They can get along so I can go to summer camp, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can actually focus on being a child.
Yes.
So I don't have to focus on monitoring the conflict levels. Like, I mean, I can think of a case where this little boy was 8 and he was saying, "Oh, can I check your phone? Because I don't have my iPad and I want to play a game." And so when he was with either parent, they would give him their phones, not realizing he wasn't playing games. He was actually reading their messages because he wanted to see what was going on in the fight so that he could manage it. And obviously he's 8.
That's
But
sad.
yeah, and but I think I mean, there's a couple of things there, but there's like a fluency with electronic equipment that his
Yeah.
parents didn't have, different generation, didn't even cross their minds that he might do something like that. Um, but then they were horrified that
I
he
bet.
felt responsible to monitor how they
Yeah.
behaved. I mean, I think, so we both worked with, the lovely Kerry Gunthorpe. Shout out to Kerry Gunthorpe.
We love you.
Um, and I just remember one thing that I've seen Kerry say to parents, which I now say to parents and say, child counselor that I worked with talks about this, which is if you're going to say something to a child, ask yourself, is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary?
Yeah. Yes.
And I think once you've asked those 3 questions, a lot of what parents want to say that is negative about the other parent really falls away
Yeah.
because it might be true and you might think it's necessary because they have to know the other parent's bad. But is it kind?
You
Is
know.
it kind to do that. I mean, I don't know what you think, but one of the things I often feel is that, and we talk to parents about a mediation is your children, even if you think I am the perfect parent and they're an absolute disaster, your children will know that. Like they will get to experience both of you. And if that's a conclusion they need to come to, they'll come to that because they'll see you and they'll see the other parent. But you don't need to be the bearer of the bad tidings.
Mm. Yeah, and again, safety, right? Just as
Yeah.
long as they're safe, and that goes back to anxiety.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
really safe? More
Yes.
than likely, they're safe if
Ye
you know you're dealing with another adult
yeah,
who cares about the child. They're probably safe. But because you're not watching, because you can't see, because you're not
yes,
monitoring, but you don't have that hypervigilance, that can
yeah,
make parents very anxious when they're at the other.
yeah. I mean, it's so actually what you were just saying is you can't see what's happening. It
Yeah.
also makes me think of other cases that I've worked on where one parent has wanted like daily updates. So if the children aren't with them, they're with the other parent. They want daily updates of what everybody's eaten and temperatures and down to kind of bowel movements, but
Yeah.
how they are. And that parent sees it as, why won't you do this? Because you say you love the children, but why won't you keep me informed as a co-parent? But from the other parent's perspective, it feels like control. So
It is
they tend to
controlling.
resist. Yeah.
Yes. Of course. And it's the other, we can say the opposite of control is anxiety. So the more,
Ooh.
not the opposite, the same thing. So the more
Yeah.
anxiety, the more control I need. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay. No, I understand what you're saying
I
because
need to
I need
control
to,
the environments.
because I
And
can't trust the other people out there. I can only trust me.
yes, so I need more control.
Wow. That
And I
is
need,
interesting.
yeah, so people who have to have a lot of control over the environment, they're probably
Mm.
really anxious and hypervigilant inside.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking back on cases that I've worked
Yeah.
on. Um, Yeah. So one question I do want to ask, um, and because people say this, so one part is I want to tell my children the truth about the other parent, about what's happened in the marriage breakdown, whatever it is. And I think we've sort of spoken about that. But the flip side that I also hear people saying is I'm not going to lie to my children because I'm a truth teller. But I guess from a child's perspective, both of these end up in the same place in terms of what they hear.
It's tricky because, yeah, you don't want to lie, but you can omit. You
Yeah.
can make it child friendly, right? You can say something like, well, mom and dad just think differently. We had different
Yeah.
ideas. We've grown, they have a new friend. I'll make some new friends too. We're all making friends. I don't know.
Yeah.
Depending on, but they don't need to know about affairs.
No. I mean, but I think you're really right. It's also making it developmentally appropriate. And I guess for small children, it's kind of obvious. They don't know what a relationship is. They don't know what a marriage is. They maybe kind of get what friends are, but maybe not even that if they're really small. I think the hard one is teenagers
Yeah.
because often I'm working with people who see their teenagers as almost a confidant because they're like, oh, they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, so they understand relationships. Is that true?
They teenagers probably know before you even tell them. They probably get it,
Yeah.
but they are not your confidant. Yes, they get it, but you do not want to parentify your teenager.
Yeah.
Your point earlier, kids should be kids, teenagers should be teenagers. They should be thinking about their own dating life, their own
Yeah.
friends, school, where am I going to go to university? What do I want to be? Right? Instead of, oh, now I'm like mom's boyfriend or dad's girlfriend and I have to be
Yeah.
this crutch. And this is kind of too big for me at my age.
Yeah. Well, I guess also it's kind of because there's also like the protector.
Yeah.
Like I need to step in because they're vulnerable or they're upset or they're not coping.
Yes. And even little kids do that. You'll
Yeah.
see little
Mm,
boys, the youngest three, trying to protect their mom. Yeah.
yeah. Because one thing that in Australia they've been talking about is to try and help parents get this sense of why is this important, is that it interrupts the developmental journey of the child. that it's kind of like a ship that gets blown off course because the crosswinds are too much. And so it's not that child doesn't follow the course that they could have followed to develop.
And that's actually a big deal because, when we start talking about high complex people, they probably didn't develop emotionally past the age of 5, some of them.
Yeah.
Something might have happened. Maybe they were parentified. Maybe they weren't allowed to have feelings. Maybe they were enmeshed,
Yeah.
right? So it's more serious than people think. Yes, your teenager gets it, but do they need to get it
Yeah.
at such a deep level? No, they don't.
Yeah.
They
I mean, I
don't. They need
definitely
to
feel
focus on
like
therapy.
there's two extremes, right, for teens. There's one which is I don't want to know anything because
Yeah.
I'm busy with my life. So, like,
Yes.
I don't want to know anything. But then there's
Yeah.
the other extreme, which is the parentified extreme, where they're so enmeshed in the problem that it then becomes almost like it's theirs.
It is theirs. It
Yeah.
is theirs.
Yeah. Because I think so. I guess if you think maybe, have I kind of overshared? Um,
Mhm.
or maybe shared in a way that's not developmentally appropriate, how do you kind of pull back from that as a parent?
Yeah, you gotta do repair, right? Because we all make mistakes in
Yeah,
our relationship. So how do you repair it? And then to your point, like how stressed is my teen? How stressed is my kid? Are they like, oh, TMI, and they get on with their life? Or
yeah,
are they not eating? Are they crying more? Are they not sleeping well? Are they acting totally different than they would normally
yeah,
act? Right? Are they more clingy? Any of those things. It could be a kid or a teenager.
yeah,
And then if so, maybe they need help. I mean, that's the extreme case of
yeah,
TMI, but
yeah.
yeah,
What if you kind of think, I kind of got back, I had a bad day, which we all do,
yes.
and I really crossed a line, which I realized I didn't want to cross, but for whatever reason, all the buttons got pushed that day. How can you repair? What sort of messaging would you use to kind of repair some of that damage?
Yeah. So are you talking about like you had a bad day, you come in, slam the
Yeah,
door?
you had a bad day and it just all leaks out. Like you just say it. Like you just say, everything went wrong at work and the other parent sent you a, you know, irritating message and now you're just overwhelmed and something happens and then you just say, well, they abandoned us kind of thing. You just blurt something out. How do you repair that? Can you repair that with a child?
Think personally, I think anything can be repaired as
Yeah.
long as it's not
Yeah.
serious abuse. Just apologize, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, and model the emotions. How would
Yeah.
you want your child to react if they just had a temper tantrum? What would you want them to say?
Yes, that
So,
was what I was
I'm
describing.
so yeah, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have shared that with you. I'm really sorry. I had a bad day. This is not your problem, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to take this. Please don't take this on. I will handle it. I will sort it. You
Yeah.
weren't abandoned. I'm just feeling abandoned, but we're not abandoned.
Yeah.
Whatever, whatever
Yeah.
you need to say.
Yeah. So it's kind of modeling how you would want them to be when they're an adult. Because I think what you're saying is
Yeah,
really
even as
true.
a teenager. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So that if they kind of had a meltdown, you would hope they would be able to say, look, I'm sorry. Let me reset. Yeah. That was just me having a bad day. People have people have bad days. I think it's also not a bad message to have. Sometimes we say things that are not thoughtful, but yeah,
yeah,
but then
yeah. No
reset,
one's perfect.
yeah, back into the reassurance and the obviously developmentally appropriate messaging around, you know, that was just me. Obviously, the other parent loves you and they're here for you, but we just had a bad day, or I had a bad day, whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's because sometimes when I talk to parents, they will say things like, "Oh, we waited until a certain time in the child's development to separate," and people will say, "Oh, the children have no idea this is happening," and you're kind of like, "But they're in the
But they
house."
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they, you know, and because of I guess what we know about emotional contagion, we know they are picking up on these signals. They may misinterpret the cause; they might think it's them, but they know things are not comfortable um, in the house. So I guess one question is just for a parent, how would you know maybe actually I am a bit overwhelmed and I should get some support? I mean, I guess that's the question. Should people get support? Can they get support for parental anxiety?
Sure. I mean, I think everyone gets anxiety
Yeah.
every now and then, especially life changes, which are divorces. It's how bad is it, right? Can I sleep? Can I eat? Am I crying? Am I hypervigilant? Am I yelling more? Am I
Mm.
coming home and blowing up, right? Then it's probably a good time to say, okay, what's in my overwhelm buckets, right? Work, kids, finances, divorce. And if it's your overwhelmed bucket feels too heavy,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Get to work.
And would that be working with like a psychologist or a counselor or a therapist or
I think personally, obviously, I'm biased. I think therapy is always a good idea.
yeah.
Always, even if you just have baby stress, just
Yeah.
someone to talk to, problem solve with. But if you, it's also can be expensive. There's also community, like church groups that can be helpful, or exercise, getting away, taking time for yourself, parental groups, right? Oh,
Yeah.
this group is for parents going through a divorce.
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, I guess what you're saying is
yeah.
kind of take some of like reduce the load in the overwhelm bucket,
Yes,
kind of make
whatever
that a
that
bit
looks like.
lighter to carry
Yeah.
whatever that is, whatever method that
Yeah.
is. If you were working with in therapy, would can
Mhm.
therapists kind of give you ways to in the moment help, or is it kind of more long term, or what would therapy mean?
Sure. And all of the above, right?
Okay.
So the most of the annoying thing when you're upset and someone says, just breathe. You're like, I don't want to breathe. But there's some truth to it, right? There's different
Mm,
breathing exercises, mindfulness. I like to use EMDR and brain spotting to kind
ah,
of rewire those neural pathways,
yeah,
especially if you've had your own childhood trauma. And now you have a child and that anxiety is on the surface.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I think that's
And
also yeah, but I think that's a really important point is that it's not necessarily what's just happened in your adult relationship, but it's then all of the memories and experiences that you have maybe had as a child. Maybe your
yes.
family also experienced separation. So now those echoes come back maybe to haunt you.
Yeah, and now that we're talking about, if we think about childhood trauma as an adult who had
Mhm.
childhood trauma, you that would make a lot of sense for anxiety. Like,
Mm,
oh, I was hit as a kid, I was neglected, I was shouted at, and so now my kid is going away. Oh my God, what if someone hurts them,
yeah,
right? And this sounds might sound a little weird, but when people want to give their child a better life than they had, and then their child does have a better life than they had, sometimes they get resentful. Like,
yeah,
how come nobody for me?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I can understand that because that need, that hole was never filled. So it's still
Yes.
there.
It's still
So
there. Yeah.
yeah.
And then kids can really bring that to the surface.
Yeah. I mean, I guess all parents feel vulnerable on some level because there's
Yeah.
now a part of you that's out in the world that,
Yeah.
you know, is, running around, climbing trees,
Yeah.
falling down. So on some level, every parent is going to feel vulnerable and anxious. But what you're talking about is really when that becomes overwhelming and now actually negatively impacts your child. Yeah. Can you just, because you mentioned two things that people may not know about, which was EMDR and brain spotting. Can I ask you to just explain what those are?
Sure. So, we do a lot of our organizing, planning, thinking in our frontal lobe, but a lot of our emotions run through our amygdala, our
Yeah.
limbic system, anger, fear, fight or flight. So EMDR, you watch fingers and it kind of distracts the hippocampus so that your brain goes back online. Because when
Right.
you're too anxious, you can't access your frontal lobe.
Yeah.
And so you also ask the person, go into your body. And this is also calming if you're anxious. What do I notice in my body? Right? Because if you're too much in your head, ruminating, going, you lose track. What's happening
Right.
here? And brain spotting is just offshoot of EMDR. And so instead of your eyes moving back and forth, you look at a point, 1 point
Okay.
or 2 points. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But I mean, I think that's really just helpful to know that there are lots of different options. So it's kind of,
Yeah,
sometimes
there's
when
lots of
people
different
say to me, "Oh, I've been to counseling and it didn't work," I'm like, "Okay, so that's one person that you've
yeah,
been to
that's one
see
modality, yeah.
who might have one particular modality, and maybe also that person just isn't a good fit for you, but the right technique, the right counselor, the right therapist could well be out there. It's just actually checking, like getting a sense. But going once and saying it doesn't work, that didn't work, but something else might really be the right fit for you.
And that's hard when you're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You're like, "Oh, great, now I have to find a therapist." And or they want me to see a psychiatrist, and just one more
Yeah.
thing to do on my to-do list. And then you Google therapist and you get a long list, right? So it can be
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's maybe a really good podcast, which is what are some of the things you could talk to a therapist about when you're considering, should I work with this person? But that sounds like another that sounds like another
Yeah, that's
podcast.
it could be another.
Yeah. Um, I guess just final question. Is there anything that if somebody thinks, I think this might be me, I think I might have parental anxiety, is there any sort of last message that you'd like to send to that person? What could they do? What should they do?
So when you have really high anxiety, you're also really mean to yourself, right?
Okay.
Oh, why did I say that? Why did I do that? So it's like you have a bully or an inner critic in your brain.
Right.
So first thing, be aware of it, and then practice self-compassion. Like, how would I talk to my child who I love, or my pet? What would my dog say to me? They would say, "I love you," no matter what. So being aware of that bully and then using self-compassion, it's not going to feel natural in the beginning, but it goes a
Yeah.
long way. And then if that's not cutting it, you're trying to reframe, you're trying to use like CBT skills. What am I feeling when I think this? How do I reframe it? It's not working, get help, right?
Right.
So you've tried, you can get help anyway. You don't have to go through all these things. But if you're really resistant to therapy
Mm.
and you feel like nothing's working, you're exercising, you have a good diet, you're
You're doing the sort of
mindful, you're
self-care.
meditating, you're
Yeah.
doing all this self care and all this self compassion and not getting anywhere,
Yeah.
then definitely seek out help.
Right.
People often think if I'm not anxious, I won't get things done because I'm always thinking and always, this helps
Right.
me think I'm doing something. You're not, you're spinning your wheels. So
Yeah.
without anxiety, you're actually more efficient, you're happier. But if anxiety's been your norm, you don't know that. You don't have no idea what it's like not to be
Yeah.
anxious.
Somebody, I was listening to somebody the other day and they said it's like fish. They swim in
Mm.
water, but because it's all around them, they don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very true.
Because if all you've known is anxiety, then not anxiety is like, what is that?
Yeah, what is that? What is that like? And it can be scary.
Yeah.
How would I get things done about my anxiety? How do I know I'm safe if I'm hypervigilant? How do I know I'm gonna be safe without
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. Okay.
Very uncomfortable.
Well, can I just say this is often also what we talk about with people in mediation. It's like the state you're in, the stage you're in is so uncomfortable. Why
Yeah,
would you want to stay there? Change can only be better than this.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary sometimes.
It is change
Yeah,
scary. I get that. It's,
yeah.
but yeah, but that kind of this is not really not pleasant. Something could be better. Is it worth giving it a go? Yeah. And also, the other thing I don't know, but also baby steps, like what you were saying, is you can start with trying maybe to stop the negative self talk, maybe actually be more compassionate, and then see if
Yes.
that doesn't work. Then look at, am I really doing self care? If that's not working, then kind of keep going up a level. Okay, Monica, thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you. It was
about
nice to see you.
so many different topics,
Yeah,
all
it's always fun.
related,
We
but
can
under
talk
one umbrella.
forever. We can talk for so long. It's
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah. But, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, and I will see you next time on Map the Maze. Take care.
Bye.